What is up, everyone? Welcome to another Super Smash Bros. Ultimate discussion video. If you've been on Twitter or if you've been around Smash in the last couple of days, you know that Gommel just finished, which is one of the biggest Canadian Smash tournaments, and a lot of drama has been surrounding this tournament because of who won it and what character you used. If you haven't been on my channel for the last few weeks, you've noticed that there's been a couple videos talking about how Steve is super broken because recently Steve has been winning a lot of tournaments and people are saying that we might need to ban Steve, so I've made a few videos talking about that. But today we have an even more pressing topic to talk about, which is that Steve just won another major from a person that is almost not a random, but he wasn't even PR'd, which is the player ranking in his state of Michigan, before he picked up Steve. Now, I want to note that a lot of arguments that you'll see from people talking about, oh, why these Steve players are suddenly getting results, is that because they were younger players, because I believe the player Onan, who we will be talking about in today's video, is 16. So I believe, and people will say like, oh, before he was only 12 or he was only 14, he competed in online tournaments only, so now this is just his first time ever getting offline. It's not that he wasn't that good, it was just, or that he's carried by Steve, it was just that he didn't get the opportunity, he was too young to be like this good. And while that is a valid argument, the only problem is that it's not like these young 16-year-old players are just winning with all their random characters because they're coming out of the woodworks and they're just really good with all their different characters. No, they're coming out with Steve and Steve only. They're getting results with Steve when they didn't get results with the other characters that they used before. And that's the big problem that I want to talk about in today's video. So recently at Gommel, as I said, we had Onan, who is a 16-year-old Steve player, win the entire thing. He won grand finals through winner's bracket. He didn't even lose any games. He faced off against Big D, who played Ice Climbers, who was the crowd favorite and one of the biggest. He had one of the biggest upset runs. I don't remember what he was seeded, but he was definitely not seeded to go that far. He made it all the way to grand finals with Ice Climbers, which I think is the best Ice Climbers result in all of Smash Ultimate's history. So that was actually really big for all you Ice Climber players. You know, Big D is showing how to do it and showing that it can be done. He tore through some of the top 10 players I think in the world. I think he beat Cola, I think he beat Riddles and other players, but the biggest thing that people are talking about is Onan, who was able to beat all of these players without even, I think the closest that he got was, he might have gone 3-2 against Riddles, I think, but that was the closest set that he played, and Riddles is now a top 10 player. So this guy, Onan, who has had he wasn't even PR'd in the state of Michigan. He had no significant results before this. I don't remember his seed, but it definitely wasn't very high. He was able to win the entire tournament without dropping a single set. He was able to win through winner's bracket, and he won with Steve. And we saw some crazy stuff. Like, the only problem, Big D was actually doing pretty well. I think he faced him early in the bracket, but he got reverse 3-0'd, which is unfortunate. But, you know, it's Steve, what are we going to do? But a lot of people are talking about, like, now that you've seen this character carry certain people, I think Steve has won 6 majors now, which is very important because a lot of the arguments that people were saying were like, yo, Steve doesn't have any results yet, you know, you guys are just exaggerating. Well, now Steve is showing that he does have the results. And now I want to address the two different sides of the Steve men, right? It's the players that play Steve and the players that don't play Steve. A lot of the Steve players I've seen on Twitter have been like voicing their opinions on the whole matter, obviously, because they're Steve players, they want to voice their opinions. And I've seen a lot of them saying that they would be concerned and that they'd be crushed if their years were the whole year of last year of meta of all the Steve tech training would be ruined if their character got banned. And this is a valid argument. If you see anybody disagreeing with this argument, you can't really disagree with that argument. It's a valid argument. The only problem is that you have to weigh that in comparison to the health of the game. If it gets to a point where the game begins to die, or the competitive scene begins to die, like it did with Smash 4 Bayo, and stuff gets that bad, that's when you have to value, well, these guys, unfortunately for them, you know, for the health of the game, we have to ban this character in order for the competitive scene to thrive. It's not just the Steve players, because unfortunately, Steve players are a minority. Obviously, I don't think it's gotten to the point where Steve should be banned yet, but if Steve continues to win, like if there's another major tournament where a random guy just brings in Steve and just wins the whole thing, beating like top players. Like, I think what everybody's really waiting for is somehow all of these new Steve players have managed to avoid like Spargo and MKLeo. Like, they haven't been forced to play any like top level Steve or any Steve. I think if they beat Leo or Spargo, I think then that'll be the tipping point, because that's beating the number 1, the number 2 player in the world is Steve, especially if you're not an experienced player or if it's a newer player. I think that'll be the tipping point where you have to say, you know, all right, we have the results now for Steve. We have all the arguments that we need. I think it's time to do a ban. You know, that's where you have to get to. But right now, unfortunately, there's not enough results. I think it's teetering towards there, especially with this victory now. And now you have the argument against Steve. You have a lot of players recently, like Cola, I know, has said that the game is becoming unfun, and same with Riddles, that the characters are just becoming the pay-to-win characters have just ruined the game. You know, the meta now revolves around those characters, and you can win without them. But like characters like Pyramithra, Kazuya, even Steve, all these characters are kind of just dominating the meta now, and it's like kind of hard to win unless you like there's certain if certain people pick them up, they're just gonna be so good that you have to pick up those characters to even fight against them. And they said, I saw Cola said that, you know, the game is becoming unfun because of these characters like Steve, and that if they just run into them in bracket, you know, it just becomes an insanely hard challenge, even if the player that you're playing against is like some nobody player that you've never heard of that has no results. You know, for these top players to be saying that running into a Steve player, no matter the skill level of the opponent, is a frightening thing in bracket, like you have to be worried about that, is like that should show that Steve is really a problem. Like, if Steve wasn't a problem, you would see somebody rolling through Steves in bracket every single time. But so far we haven't seen a player like that. Nobody really knows. There's not really, the Steve players will say get to know the matchup, or you'll need to learn counterplay. But unfortunately for all these top players who obviously dedicate most of their time to learning the game, because this is their job, is to play professionally, they seem to not be able to find any counterplay yet. Which leaves to be said, is there really any Steve counterplay that's actually good? Like, is there a Steve counterplay? And if the Steve counterplay does exist, where is it? And how good is it against Steve? Like, there can be counterplay, but it could just not work. It could make Steve a little less broken than he already is. So, I also want to spread the movement that I think that Steve is top 1 in the game. I think at this point that anybody who says that Steve should be banned should also be saying that Steve is top 1 in the game. There's no point in saying that Steve, like, if Steve is not your top 1 in the game, you're not banning Steve, right? If you still think that Kazuya, or I mean, if you still think that Joker or Pyramithra are top 1 in the game after, and you still think that Steve is broken, I think that's silly. But I do believe that Steve will be banned. I'll go about on a limb, and I'll say that Steve should be banned if he wins another major in the coming weeks, and if the player isn't already PR'd at least in their state. Because I think the biggest thing about Onan is that he wasn't even PR'd in his state, and he just came and won this huge Canadian major. Obviously, there were a lot of Michigan represents, but what do you guys think? Do you guys think that Steve will be banned after this? What do you guys think about this? What do you think about Onan winning Gommel? Do you think that first of all, do you think he would have won if not for Steve? Because I know he plays, I think his secondaries were Robin and Joker, and this is not a hit on Onan. He's a fantastic player, but I just don't think he would have won Gommel without Steve. Do you guys think that as well, or do you guys think that Steve isn't that big of a problem? He's just a good character, and he doesn't need to be banned? Let me know down in the comments below. As always, if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like down below, and I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time.